Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What's a true crime cold case that just doesn't sit right with you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. August 26th, 1995 is the day she disappeared from a strip of beach along the Ohio River in Spotsville, Kentucky. The guy who saw her abduction, he was across the river in Indiana, watching through a telescope that he used to peep on women sunbathing, like Heather was. He said he saw a bushy-haired, bearded man with a mosquito net around his face carrying a gun drag her by the hair. Her jean shorts, white Keds sneakers, and plaid bikini top were found, but no sign of Heather. Henderson County Sheriffs and Kentucky State Police zeroed in on Marty Dill, a local creep. He'd had a few run-ins with the law before. They went to search his house and bring him in for questioning, and he barricaded himself inside. Oh, and remember the bushy hair and beard? He'd shaved both off 4 months before Heather went missing. He barricaded himself in his house until his uncle, a KSP trooper, came in and started talking him down. And then there was a gunshot, or a few, and supposedly Marty Dill committed suicide, except the evidence doesn't support that. There was a suspected serial killer in the area. Last I saw, he was in prison in Ohio for a murder he admitted to. He's never admitted to any other murders. Heather has never been found. I don't remember her name, but I saw one on a cold case TV show that left me screaming at the detectives. Woman mysteriously vanished from her work without a trace, and they found her body a few weeks later. During this time, they showed interviews with her husband, who she married pretty recently, I think. And the way he talked about her was terrifying. He went on and on about how he hated her kids, they were taking her away from him, she wasn't allowed to be anyone else's, etc. Never made any sort of expression other than a blank stare. Near the end of the episode, he talked about how he slept with her urn every night and frolicked in the ashes every morning. He lied to her son that he lost the urn so that the kids wouldn't have access to their mom's memorial. His last statement was that he was glad she was dead because it meant that nobody else could have her. The episode concluded with the narrator saying that they currently had no suspects. I mean, come on. The murder of Shannon Gilbert and the Long Island serial killer case. Love it. In 2010, an eagle-eyed cop with a cadaver dog spotted something out of place in a bramble patch near Gilgo Beach on Long Island while searching for a woman named Shannon Gilbert, who disappeared in the area earlier that year. They didn't find Shannon, but they did find a body, and another, and a few more. They found a total of around 10 bodies, most of them nothing but skeletons and just bits of bodies all wrapped in burlap and dumped in the brambles. A few of them they actually managed to match with bits of bodies discovered in other places as far back as 1996. The thing that doesn't sit right with me was the circumstances surrounding Shannon Gilbert's death and autopsy. The search for Shannon Gilbert is what led to the discovery of the serial killer's dumping ground, but Gilbert herself wasn't in it. She was found almost a year later in a marsh about half a mile from the beach. When they conducted an autopsy, they said that she drowned in the marsh. Her death was ruled an accident and the case was closed. This was despite the fact that she was reportedly running around at 4 o'clock in the morning, banging on people's doors, saying someone was after her, and she made a panicked 911 call, saying as much before she fled into the marsh and was never seen again. Accident. Right. Her family and their lawyers naturally called bullshit on this, and a second autopsy was preferred, where they found evidence that she was strangled, and the cops also left out the little detail that she was found face up, which isn't common for drowning victims. Furthermore, the cops sealed the 911 tapes from the night Shannon died, and her family's lawyers had to fight tooth and nail to get those tapes unsealed, and they found out that the cops weren't exactly telling the truth about the content of those tapes. Also, the cops' handling of the serial killer case didn't sit right with me either. James Burke, guilty, who was the Suffolk County Chief of Police at the time, as well as one in charge of the case, repeatedly blocked any and all attempts by the FBI to help solve the case and was really otherwise not doing much to solve the damn thing. Burke was eventually ousted as the Chief of Police when he was arrested on various counts of corruption and an incident where he beat the shit out of someone who stole a duffel bag full of dildos and pornography out of his van. All these weird details, including a few I left out, because the thing is long enough as it is, about this woman's murder, which led to the discovery of the serial killer, the weird police response to all of it, and just the general all-singing, all-dancing shit show the investigation became, just raises so many questions. This case is near and dear to me. I have my suspicions, but I'm just a private citizen, but James Burke, not a good dude. Not typically a cold case, because the case was closed as far as I knew, although there is chatter about new leads. Gareth Williams, an ex-spy for the British Secret Service, was found dead in his flat a week after he went missing. His naked body lay stuffed in a duffel bag in his flat's bathtub, the zipper pad locked on the outside. Although the coroner thought it was likely the result of foul play, the police declared his death an accident, an unfortunate result of Williams locking himself in the duffel bag and unable to get out, after which he died. Still seems like a bad cover-up to me. Edit. I just now learned that Williams was known to have a fetish for auto-asphyxiation, bondage, and total enclosure, which may have had a thing to do with how he ended up in the duffel bag, but it still doesn't explain how the zipper got padlocked from the outside. There has been a call to analyze existing evidence, hair and DNA from the padlock, to maybe get a new lead, but I haven't heard about anything turning up yet. Although it may have been an assisted accidental suicide, there are still unanswered questions. For me, the hardest thing about cold cases is that the police often know who it is, or strongly suspect who it is. They simply do not have enough evidence to charge that person. For example, detectives identified the Green River killer immediately, couldn't afford to keep a 24/7 surveillance on him. DNA evidence developed 30 years later finally convicts the original suspect. There are many cases where what a suspect is saying simply doesn't add up. Sometimes you can prove someone is lying, but you simply don't have enough evidence to convict them, even though it's the most likely explanation for what happened. It makes me wonder how many cases would be solved if future technology existed now, if that makes sense. Like if 30 years from now, we will have another breakthrough in fighting crime like we did when DNA technology advanced. I hope so. And I hope we develop as a society a way to prevent crime that is so effective that reactionary and detective measures won't be as sorely needed. I remember there was this case from a few decades back. Little boy disappeared for months. Town goes crazy trying to find him. Later, an older man is found with a boy similar to the missing kid's description. Man says it's his sister's nephew, that he got permission to take on the trip, but the kid seemed to not quite be all there or something. I think the even days he doesn't know the man when he's separated and questioned. They take him back to his family, the one who reported him missing initially, but the kid also shows no recognition of that family, and they claim his actions and habits are completely different and that he's not the same. Of course, they assume abuse, and after a few years, he's back to normal. With that said, the entire time the other family of the man who said it was his nephew has been fighting to get him back because they claim that's their kid. There's a huge legal battle, and the first family ends up with custody, but the second family spends years trying to get him back and claiming they stole their son. Theory is, if he is the second family's kid, he may have lied about not knowing his uncle as a joke, but when he was placed with the other family, he was too scared to say the truth until he eventually believed it himself. Now it's generations later. That kid is dead along with anyone else who was alive at the time, but the descendants of both families still exist. Both families are divided. We now live in an age where DNA tests from a descendant of the missing kid and a descendant of a sibling from the first family and one from the second family should be able to set this case once and for all. But none of the missing kid's descendants want to go through with it because they know the truth and don't need to prove anything. The disappearance and death of Patrice Enders. Check out the Cold Case Files reboot on Netflix. The husband maintains his innocence, but he's creepy as fudge. There's a lot of things he's said and done that just doesn't sit right. For starters, he seemed to have some kind of personal jealous vendetta against Patrice's teenage son because he was the main focus of her life. Even in interviews, he'd openly say the kid is a loser, and he just didn't feel like he was going anywhere in life. Then, when Patrice went missing from her hairstylist business, he went ahead and changed all the locks in the house so the son couldn't come in the house. Since then, the kid's basically been banned from entering the house, and the creepy husband has said that he would snuggle with the ashes of Patrice like a teddy bear as he sleeps. But then when asked where her remains were, he had to go dig it out of an old cardboard box in a closet. If you loved someone so dearly, why would you keep their remains in a plastic bag in a cardboard box in a closet? It's just weird and creepy all around. Rebecca Zaha. Woman dating a multimillionaire CEO allegedly committed suicide by hanging herself from a balcony at his house while naked, with her wrists and ankles bound and her hands behind her back, gagged with a t-shirt wrapped around her head, tape residue on her legs, and evidence of 4 instances of head trauma, along with a cryptic suicide note saying, "She shaved him. Can he save her?" That was supposedly not in her handwriting. The sheriff's department decided it was suicide, primarily because they didn't find any other DNA at the scene besides the house, which is weird considering it was the CEO's house, so you'd think his DNA would be there too. It seems more likely that the scene was cleaned before the police got there than that he never shed DNA. Additionally, the CEO's brother was supposedly there and found the body. He was in town and staying at the house because his nephew, the CEO's 6-year-old son by his earlier marriage, not to Zaha, and she may have been the cause of this divorce, had fallen over the same banister 2 days earlier and died. Zaha was supervising the kid at the time, and one doctor contended that there was evidence of suffocation prior to his fall. The CEO's brother may have believed she strangled the kid and pushed him over the railing and decided to take revenge, and the sheriff's department may have half-assed the investigation into the death of an immigrant at the house of a multimillionaire. Or maybe it really was the weirdest suicide ever, but I'm skeptical. And so was a jury in a wrongful death suit against the brother, awarding Zaha's family $5 million in damages. Bryce Lespiza is one that I think of often. This guy was in his sophomore year of college, and the school was a few hours from home. His girlfriend and friends all said he'd been acting weird for a few weeks, and if I'm remembering right, I think him and his girlfriend had gotten into it or something, and he called his parents to say he'd be coming home for a while, so they stayed up waiting what should have only taken a few hours. He calls his mom a couple of times to say he got off on the wrong exit or had car trouble, so it was going to slow him down some. Time goes by, and his mom sees on the GPS on her phone that he hasn't moved for some time, so she sends a cop out to make sure he's okay. He's fine. He's just sitting in his car on the side of the road not doing anything. So he talks with the cop, who goes on to follow him and make sure he's heading the right direction. Then things just go radio silent. His parents never heard from him again, and his car and all of his stuff are sitting abandoned after getting in a wreck down a backwoods road he should have never ever been on. This happened in 2013, and he still hasn't been found. This is a very interesting case. I'd never heard of it before. Thanks for sharing. In my town, there was a girl in her early 20s. It's a small town, 1,000 people maybe. Most of everyone lives in the boonies, super rural place. Anyway, she worked at a restaurant bar in the village. Her boss and coworkers said her shift ended and she punched out. She didn't show up the next day for her shift. They actually never found her. Sure, they found hair, blood, and a shoe. They found her car parked in an abandoned house outside town, but they never found her body. Search parties throughout the woods, police dogs, everything. My mother and I searched for a good few weeks as well. We all found nothing. My mother worked at a mountain resort for a bit a couple years later. She was in the back room on break when her coworker came in. He sat at an employee computer. My mom got ready to head back out to the front desk. She turned to ask her coworker a question. He was scrolling a missing persons website, and there she was. My mother saw her smiling face, the girl in her 20s. The coworker turned and made eye contact with my mom. He smiled and turned back and said, "They never did find her. Pretty little thing, huh?" He turned back to my mom and said, "I wish I could have seen her one more time." And my mom quit. That night, she quit her job. She drove home. She sat on her bed for hours, wouldn't talk to us. She swears to this day he murdered the girl. She just got this feeling. He moved a couple of weeks later after he said that weird shit. She actually only told me all this a couple of years ago. When this happened, I was like 10 years old. I'm 25 now. That female intuition is a powerful tool. It would have been very interesting if you would have followed up with the police right after. Oh, there are 5 or 6 from the Los Angeles area that keep me up at night on occasion. On Christmas Eve 2011, a little old lady from the San Pedro area was stabbed to death as she walked home from evening mass. Her name was Ava A. Tice. She was found clutching her Bible. She had a very simple mind and reportedly never hurt a fly. Someone just randomly stabbed her dozens of times and left her on the sidewalk. She wasn't robbed. It was apparently completely random. Of course, one of the most famous murder cases is the case of the Black Dahlia. A woman, Elizabeth Short, was found in a vacant lot in the 1940s. Her body had been mutilated. The police botched the case, which became a media circus. Over 150 suspects were identified, but no one was ever charged. Of course, the Natalie Woods case, a famous actress goes overboard in calm seas and is found with bruises on her body. The authorities have been investigating the case since 2011, but new developments are scarce, and neither Christopher Walken nor Robert Wagner are talking. In 2009, a prominent lawyer was gunned down in his driveway in a very expensive neighborhood in Palos Verdes. He died in his wife's arms. Authorities suspected a hired hitman killed the lawyer, but never identified him. They identified a man who they believed solicited the hit on him, a businessman named Richard Wall, whose enemies had a habit of ending up murdered, but Wall moved to a non-extradition country in 2017 and isn't coming back. One last case haunts me. In 1992, during the height of gang violence and crack cocaine in the city of Los Angeles, 2 preteen Latino boys were killed in a drive-by shooting after they were misidentified as members of a Latino street gang. The gang members who killed them were convicted, but the 2 boys, presumably because they were children of undocumented immigrants, have never been identified. To this day, they are both John Does.